folks, welcome to Riffs with Mark. I'm Mark Cruz, and I'm going to be showing you some riffs. This is a course that is geared towards improvisation, and improvisation is where you make things up. I was just improvising when you tuned in there. I was using a little bit of the G pentatonic scale and a little bit of the G Mixolydian Mode, which is sort of what we're going to be talking about this week a little bit. Now, improvising can be when you make stuff up by yourself, or it can be when you play along with a backing track, when you play along with songs that you like playing with. Soloing is often thought of as improvisation. And so far we've talked about the major pentatonic scale. I'll play you a little bit of the C major pentatonic scale, or the C blues scale. They're not the same thing, but for our purposes, we're using them as the same thing. The major pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, and so it's 1, 2, 3, skip 4, 5, 6, and 1. Those are the scale degrees that we use from the major scale to make the major pentatonic scale. And then there's, of course, the minor pentatonic scale. And that's a C minor pentatonic scale. This is the first week that we're going to be adding a note. We're going to be adding a flat 7 to the major pentatonic scale. So I'd have you go ahead and refer to your major pentatonic scale shapes from a few weeks ago, or better yet, Chris, if you want to put up on the screen this sheet, which is, hopefully my camera will focus, there we go, and that is the major pentatonic / blues scale positions with an added flat 7, okay? So that is the note that we are adding to our scale. It's the flat 7. Now the major scale, the regular major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, has what we would call a major 7th, or maybe a natural 7. In C major, it's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. But what we're gonna do instead of that B, we're gonna actually add a B flat. Okay, so it's gonna sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. Now the reason that we're doing this is because the flat 7 is a little bit easier to use for improvisation than the natural 7. It's you are able to use it over a lot of things. Anytime you have just a major chord, if you have a major chord that's the root note, like the root chord if you're playing in C major, if you're going like this. And I'm just going C to F. Well, over the C, if you add that flat 7, it just ends up making it a C7. And then over the F, you can have a little bit of conflict. But that's what the B flat sounds like over the F. It really doesn't sound bad. It's not going to hurt anybody. That'll be okay. But what we get there, just C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, we call that the C Mixolydian Mode. Okay, and that's maybe what you might have seen a little bit with the title of this. I think we called it Borrowing from the Mixolydian Mode. We're not going to use the entire Mixolydian Mode because I only wanted to add one note to what you're doing, okay? If you take a look at those scale diagrams and you see we've got your major pentatonic shapes, I particularly have you, especially if you're new to this, I particularly have you look at position 5. I think that's the best major pentatonic shape is position 5. It looks a lot like position 1 of the minor pentatonic. Really looks exactly the same. The root note is just in a different place. So if you look at position 5, it actually starts on the 6th, but really get that root note in your head. I'm going to play it in C. And this is a very important, I'm going to say this, okay? I might say it multiple times, but Chris, if I cut out at this point, make sure you let me know because I need to say it again. These are not the Mixolydian Mode. Okay, this is not the Mixolydian Mode. This is a scale that I don't even want to say scale because I don't want you to practice it as a scale. I have never taken these shapes with the flat 7, major blues scale with an added flat 7. I've never taken that and practiced that as a scale, going like... Oh, I'm sorry, I even messed it up. That's how much I've never practiced it as a scale. However, I use it in improvisation all the time. So what this is about, this is not about taking these shapes and learning them backwards and forwards, being able to play them up and down really fast. What it's about is seeing where that flat 7 lies in relation to your major pentatonic, major blues scale, okay? Like, that's what this is about. Make sure you see where that red note is. That is your flat 7, and it's a cool note. And we'll use it in our riffs. So, all right, so the difference between this and the Mixolydian mode is, if you want to actually take a look at the tabs at this point, I think I tabbed it out. In example, it just says C Mixolydian mode for starters, and that was what I played before. That has that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. Whereas what this is it goes 1, 2, flat 3, 3. Just like the major blues scale. 5, so we skipped 4. We don't play 4, just like with the major blues scale. 5, 6, now this is the note we add, flat 7, right there. And then 1. If you're an advanced player and you're going, Mark, why aren't you just teaching the Mixolydian mode? Hey, I hear you, like the Mixolydian mode, it is great, it is fantastic, but as far as getting into this fast, getting into improvisation, what I've found in my own playing is the most useful. I want to have that blue note in there, and the Mixolydian mode doesn't actually have that blue note. Also, as far as actually using scales, like using scales, like major scales, is part of the reason we don't really do the major scale for improvisation a lot either, is it can really sound like you're playing a scale. Like, that can be sort of what it is. It can kind of sound a lot like do, re, mi, like you're just going up and down the scale. With this, it's going to break that up a little bit more. I almost promise. Let me show you a little bit of what this sounds like. I'm going to use the jam track that we've been using of the 12-bar blues. Sorry about that there. Let's see if I can get this pulled up. And blues in C. So this is in C major. It's a 12-bar blues. And I'm going to use this scale a little bit. Forgive me if I throw some other notes in there, but I'll really try to hang on that flat 7 so you can hear what that sounds like. That's the flat 7. Flat 7. Sorry, I threw that little chromatic thing there. Which is okay if you want to do it. That's flat 7, natural 7 up to 1. And if you're a beginner, don't worry about doing that. Just focus on that flat 7. Flat 7. Now, one thing you're going to see in the tabs that we do today, I like to bend the 6th note of the scale up to the flat 7. I really like to do that. That's going to happen in multiple riffs today. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of what the Mixolydian mode sounds like. Let me get my notes for this out. My wife and I moved this past week, so we're actually in a new apartment. We're down in Florida, and so this was a completely new setup for the lesson series, so bear with me. I'm using a couple computer monitor boxes as my desk for my notes here. But I wanted to make sure I cover everything. We talked about adding the flat 7, the differences between this and the Mixolydian mode. Now, this is something I wrote down in my notes, was the question of should I learn the Mixolydian mode? If you're a serious guitar player, learn the Mixolydian mode. Do that. We're not doing it in this lesson. We may not do it in this lesson series. It's only a matter of adding one more note, and that is the 4th note of the scale. That's the 4th scale degree. But you can definitely find scale diagrams on Jamplay for the actual Mixolydian mode. I do suggest it. I'm not, but as far as using improvisation, this is what I like to use. I like to use the major pentatonic scale with an added flat 3. And eventually you also add the 4, and you know where all the notes are. That's kind of what it comes down to. Now, where to use this? There are a lot of places that you can use it. You saw me use it basically over that entire 12-bar blues. And that's up in the air as to whether or not, like, there are some places where it'll clash a little bit, but it probably won't be a big deal. Anytime you have the root note as the root note of your chord, like if you're in C major and there's a C major chord, feel free to use the C Mixolydian mode. That'll be, or the C add a flat 7 basically is what you can do there. That is just fine. In rock and roll music, you'll get a lot of songs that have a flat 7 chord. Now this is where you can just have a field day with it because it'll all just totally fit. And the song that's really coming to mind right now is Sweet Home Alabama. It goes D. We would say it's in the key of D, but it goes D, C, G. And I can only play a little bit probably because of copyright, but so that's the idea. But D, C, and G, and that's a very common chord progression in that order, in the key of D, D, C, and G. And those 3 chords using the D major pentatonic scale with an added flat 7, it's going to sound really, really good. Also, I just want to throw it out there. I couldn't take this riff and teach it for the purposes of this lesson because, of course, copyright. But I am going to play it real quick because we can use less than 10 seconds of it. But it's the little interlude riff in Sweet Home Alabama. There's, of course, the main riff, which is cool. Definitely learn that. But learn this riff and try to see where it fits in this scale. And it also does use the 4 of the Mixolydian mode. But this riff is just one of the coolest riffs, I think, in rock and roll music. That right there. Hopefully you caught it because I can't do it again. But that riff right there, learn that riff, see where it lies in the scale, use it just like the riffs that we use in this series where you change something about it and you use it in your own solos. It's one of my favorite riffs to go to, but it uses the Mixolydian mode. It also uses the flat 3rd. And I didn't want to add the flat 3rd and the 4, and the flat 7. I didn't want to add all of that. It would have made these scale diagrams a mess. So we've just got the flat 3rd in there like normal, but then we added the flat 7. So anyway, I think that's enough of that. And also anytime there's a dominant 7th chord. If you see a dominant 7th chord, you want to use that 7th chord's Mixolydian mode. If you see G7, use G Mixolydian or G major pentatonic with an added flat 7. I'm going to be really tired of saying that by the end of the lesson, and you're probably going to be tired of hearing it. But G major pentatonic scale with an added flat 7, almost the G Mixolydian mode. So G7. That's going to sound really good over it. That's going to work really, really well over a G7 chord. If you see an F7, we're talking about using the F major pentatonic scale with an added flat 7. It's going to sound really good. And in some of the riffs today, we'll take a look at actually outlining what we call an arpeggio, or the notes of a dominant 7th chord. So, shall we move on to riffs? Chris, go ahead and let me know if there are any questions at this point. I probably won't get to them for another second or two, but gosh, we left the air conditioner on. Chris, how is the noise? Is Is there a lot of noise? Should I get up and change and turn off the air conditioner? I'm really sorry about that. My mistake, everybody. Noise is fine. Wow, it seems loud as can be. So that's lovely, lovely. All right, folks, I'm going to try to let my eyes do a good job of reading this here. But if you please be patient with me. Usually I have the material a little bit closer. But if we look at figure 1.1, that's going to be riff 1 today. And it goes like this. I put a little bit more slide in there than I should have. So check it out. Yeah, there we go. All right. So what we're doing is we're starting in position 5. Now, like I said, this is my favorite position of the major pentatonic scale. Oh, sorry. And we're, of course, adding that flat 7. So I'm in C, okay? And the places that that flat 7 occurs are here on the 8th fret of the D string, also on the 6th fret of the low E string, and also that means on the 6th fret of the high E string. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but the 6th fret of the high E string in position 5 may be the most common flat 7 that I use. Like, I use it all the time. I'm sorry, I didn't tab that out, I just made it up. So, something like that. But I also use this one a ton, and that's the 8th fret of the D string in the key of C. That's your B flat. And the way I use that one most of the time is I bend the 6th up to it. I bend that 7th fret like that. And we'll see that a little bit in some of these riffs, I think, in this position. So that is riff 1, 8th fret of the B string, 5th fret of the G. You hit that blue note there on the 8th fret. Now, to be honest, when before I actually read this, I knew what the riff sounded like because I came up with it a few days ago, and so I automatically wanted to articulate it a little bit differently. I don't honestly know why I wrote it so simply, but like I wanted to slide into that blue note. And I wanted to go like that. I wanted to hit the 7th fret and then slide into the 8th fret. But you could also bend it, and I may have us do that in a little bit. I don't exactly remember. But go ahead and articulate that however you want. That's all, like that's what this is about. It's all about taking the riffs, doing what you can to make them your own, and just really go to town on that. Change them however you want. Now, another big part of this is learning to play the riffs in multiple positions. And some people have asked, well, why are we doing that? You know, we already learned it in this one position. Why do we have to learn it in another position? And it's okay if you don't want to. Like, it's all right, especially if you're a beginner to improvisation, just focusing on position 5 of the major pentatonic, position 1 of the minor pentatonic. It's okay if you want to just focus on playing the riffs in one position, but when you're able to play up the entire fingerboard, I promise you'll have more fun. Like, it's a lot more fun, and it's all part of learning the rest of the fingerboard. So if you take a look at figure 1.2, that's riff 1. It's still in the key of C, but now we're going to use position 2 of the major pentatonic scale. And it's going to sound like this. Sounds exactly the same. And I want to point out, sorry, I should have pointed this out first. The very last note that you're playing, that's the flat 7. That's the flat 7. Same as down here. It's that 8th fret of the D string down here. Here it's the 13th fret of the A string. So hopefully that makes sense. And with any of these, I think it's important to play the scale around it. Sorry? just like that. Make sure you see the scale shape around it. Even if you only want to play your major pentatonic scale, that's honestly maybe what I would do. Like I told you, I don't practice these as scale shapes. I just use, like, the purpose of these is to show where the flat 7 is in relation to your major pentatonic scale. So the riff goes, and that's with my articulation, of course. That's how you have it in your tabs, and that's figure 1.2. Same riff, just in a different part of the scale. Now, what I would ask you is if you take a look at figure 1.3, oh, I'm sorry, figure 1.3 is the same riff down an octave. So this is actually going to use position 4 of the major pentatonic scale. And that can, of course, be a good reason to play a riff in a different position, is because you want to play it down or up an octave. And so that's what we're doing there. It's this shape. And just as the major pentatonic scale, it's this. And so we go blue note, and that's the flat 7 there, the 6th fret of the lowest string. Now, all right, this is like your homework here. It's figure 1.4. Take a look at that. I only have the first 4 notes lined out for you, and I told you it is using position. What position is that? It is position 3 of the major pentatonic scale. I've told you before, don't get hung up on the position, the number names. I honestly just use the numbers that are standard that everybody uses for the major pentatonic scale. I mean, they're standard, but if you tell a guitarist, hey, use position 1 of the major pentatonic scale, sorry, I can't guarantee they're going to know what you're talking about. So what it really comes down to is learn the shapes. Learn what the shapes look like. These are standard shapes, at least the major and minor pentatonic scale shapes that we're working on. So anyway, take a look at that. All I have is, that's it. You got to figure out the rest. You got to figure out the rest. It sounds like this. I'll play it in another position. But you got to go, well, what's next? What do you do next? So sound that out. Not necessarily now. You don't have to do it now. But figure out how many other ways you might be able to play this. Like I'll tell you, you could maybe play it. Well, maybe. That's the only time I'm doing that, though. Not going to give it away. And I may have had to use open strings there. But one thing that we did, I went to school for music. I was fortunate enough to get to do that in 2004. I didn't do particularly well in jazz school. But one thing that my teacher had us do that I really, really respect a lot is he had us take these different patterns. He called them 2-5-1 patterns because they worked really well over the chord progression 2-5-1. That's something like this. And that was A minor, D, G, okay? And he'd have us play this pattern. For example, that was one of them. I remember that one. He'd have us play that every possible way to play it on the guitar. There were like 25 different ways to play each of them. I'm only going to demonstrate one other one. So notice that. And something like that. You saw how it sounded about the same, other than where I messed up. Sounded the same, looked different. And that kind of thing is super good for your ears. So this would be a good riff here to take and sound it out every possible way to play it on the fingerboard. There are many different ways to play it. If you find, you'll have to even go outside of these shapes, but just use your ear. Use your ear, see if you can sound it out. Like if you started it, if you started it with your pinky finger, try starting it with your ring finger and see if you can change a few things. Start it with your middle finger. Start it with your index finger, starting on the same exact spot. Ooh! That's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. It's something I'd have to work on. But it's super good for you. Really, really good for you. So, moving on. Sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there. I hope nobody minds too much. Chris, we're all good. No cuts in the feed or anything like that. No. If there are any questions, let me know. Oh, okay. All right. We're going to do figure 1.5 at this point. What I've done here is it's an extension of the same riff, of riff 1. And let's see if I can do this. That's it. From the top. So it gets a little rhythmic in that third measure. And all this is us saying, and Chris, I didn't hear from you. I'm going to check my text real quick and just make sure that there hasn't been some kind of emergency. Chris, go. Okay, all right. You're typing. We're good. Okay, cool. Thank you, man. I just wanted to make sure. Go ahead and pull up my documents again. There we go. So what I've told you, no, it's all good, man. Don't worry about it. It's all good. And sorry, folks, that's just me and Chris talking. If we go back to figure 1.5 there, what I've told you is with all these riffs, I want you to take them, I want you to learn them, and then I want you to figure out how you can make them your own. So what 1.5 is it's an extension of what we already did. It's a different way to end it, and you can come up with your own endings. The part that I would say is the most important here is in that second measure, that bend of that 6th note of the scale. It's on the 7th fret of the D, up to that flat 7, and back down. I'm not even picking it again on the way back down. That's another flat 7. And that's just one example of how you could end this riff. So let's move on here. Gosh, I can hardly see the time from here. Oh, I gotta say, I really liked this one. If you look at 2.1, this is almost one that would be more of like you could use this in a solo just fine, but you could, it's almost sort of like a southern rock kind of feel, like of the main, like the guitar part of a song or something. I'm really digging into it a little bit. You know, it's you don't have to dig in that much with the. You can pick a little bit more politely than I just did if you like. But you start with what we call a double stop. I'm not sure if I've used that term before, but a double stop just means 2 notes at the same time, and it's a pretty loose term. I mean, you would rarely call a power chord a double stop, but it kind of is actually. But usually a double stop is used in the middle of a lead line a lot of the time. So in this case, we call that a double stop, the two notes there at the 5th fret. Now note that this is in position, yes, position 5 and 1. I thought I had a mistype there, but start in position 5, hit those 2 notes right in the middle, 7th fret, pull off to 5th fret, 7th fret, slide up to the 9th fret. And that's a pick and slide. That's not a pick and pick and slide. It's just a pick and slide. And then 7th fret to the 9th fret again, but this time you hammer it. And then it's 10th fret, and that's that 6th note of the scale. You're in position 1 now. It's the same thing we did down here, but same notes, just up an octave, okay? And that's 6th note in the scale up to the 7th note in the scale. And I should have clarified a little here. You're bending from here to here. So get a feel for that sound. Get a feel for that sound of the flat 7. And what we have coming down the scale, still in position 1 there, we've got the first note of the 2nd measure after the bend. You do blue note, hammer on to the regular 3rd, and then you got 6th, hammer on to flat 7. Blue note to the root note. Try to play it even slower. And, you know, I'm not sure if you guys get the Guitar Pro file of this, but I don't believe it's going to play for you in swung 8th notes. Or actually swung 16th notes in this case. But I felt like swinging almost all of the riffs this week, so I'm putting a pretty heavy kind of shuffle swing on it. I like that quite a bit. So if we move on and we take a look at 2.2, figure 2.2, same exact riff. I just moved it to E major. Remember, I guess it was just last week we talked about transposing riffs, and so I don't think we've really done that with any of the riffs this week yet. We're taking this riff in C major, and we started in position 5. We're still going to be in position 5, but now we're going to be in E major. So, oh, I threw the 4 in there. I shouldn't have done that. So that's what we're working around, and the riff sounds like this in E major. So check that out. It's, you know, like once you've got it under your fingers in C, bring it up to E, then bring it into any key. Bring it into every single key. Bring it into A flat down here. Bring it into B flat. Play it in every key, partly to get the sound of it across keys. It'll sound pretty much the same, just higher or lower. But, you know, there's only a 1 in 12 chance that when you put on a jam track or a song that it's going to be in the key of C. It might be a little bit better of a chance than 1 in 12 for the key of C, because it's a very common key. But there are 12 major keys, you know, and so being able to play the riff in any key. And last week we talked about finding the key, finding the root note and everything. If in the questions today, that was something where last week nobody really asked any questions about it, and I want to make sure people got a good understanding of that, so we can go over that in the Q&A. But please let Chris know in the feed and everything, and he'll relay that to me. But play that in every key. Get it under your fingers. Get the feel of the difference in the spacing between the frets. It's going to feel different at the 7th fret than it will at the 2nd fret. It's going to feel different in the key of D than it's going to feel in the key of A. All right. So now what we're going to do, if we take a look at the next figure, that is figure 2.3, I'm going to play this riff in the key of G. Okay. This is a transposition. Oh, sorry, that's a question. We'll get to that in just a second. Thank you, Chris. If we take a look at 2.3, this is a transposition to the key of G. But instead of taking the riff and going, okay, this is C here, this is G here, which is fine. It would be perfectly fine to do that. We're going to put it in a different position, okay? So we are going to use positions 3 and 4 of the major pentatonic scale for this. Notice it sounded exactly the same as here. So you remember how we did this with Riff 1 as well. We did this with Riff 1 where we went, let's see if I can remember. And then we played it in a different position. Well, now we're playing it in a different position and we're transposing it. We're using it in the key of G, but we're playing it differently than we played it in the key of C. These are good things to get used to. You could do this in the key of C as well, play it in that different position. It would be up an octave if I went. And I went, let's see. What I did was I played it in C just the way that we played it in G, using the same positions, but in the original key. Sorry that was confusing. For now, if you want to just focus on key of G and the key of C, just what we have here, but take note of the positions you're playing in. You know, if we go back to figure 2.3, make sure you play that key of G around it. You play that. That position 3, and we go. And there you go. So again, let me know if there are any questions regarding that. That kind of thing can be confusing. Before we move on to Riff 3, I want to tackle this question. Yes. Oh, sorry, I should read the question first. My mistake. Is the Mixolydian type sound usable in other styles besides blues? Yes, I would say it's very rock and roll oriented as well. I'd say I use the Mixolydian mode. We'll go ahead and go with that. Don't prove me wrong, Chris. Don't prove me wrong. Don't worry about it. All right, so Back in Black uses the Mixolydian mode right there. It's in the key of E. Like, it's definitely an E tonality and everything, but it goes E and then a D natural chord. There's no D natural in an E major scale. That's a D sharp right there. Right there, right? But no, we're using a D natural chord. E, D, A. So that uses that Mixolydian mode, that Mixolydian sound. Definitely usable in styles other than blues. I don't know what my improvisation sounds like to you guys. I'm very much a mutt in terms of my improvisation styles. I went to school for jazz. I love blues. I love tackling blues, but it's always very jazz-based blues, just because I've just had so much of that ingrained into me, and also a bit of country. I've been living in the Southeast for the past 10 years, so I can't escape that. So it's a lot of different stuff that kind of falls in. So if it sounds bluesy, cool. I'll take, that's great. But recognize you can use this in a lot of things. You can use it in country as well. I off the top of my head, the best I can do is like the Southern rock kind of stuff right now. I use very much with my country playing, I use a mix of the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic, but there are so many dominant 7th chords in country that you could definitely use the Mixolydian mode as well. And that's all about, the chicken picking. And if you're into country at all, I strongly suggest the Andy Wood jam play course. It's absolutely fantastic. I've definitely learned a lot of good stuff from Andy on that course. I believe it's called Country Shred, but it's Andy Wood's jam play course. Definitely check that out. It looks like we had a blackout in the live lesson, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick up at figure 3.1. I'm gonna do that real quick because I think we got that, but that goes. Okay, and that's in the key of G, the way that I have it. It starts in position 2, which is this one, of the major pentatonic / blues scale. And of course we're adding the flat 7, but we run right up to position 3. And this is something that you're going to see a lot, especially if you ever play bass, doing the root note of a chord, of a scale. and then going up to the major third on the same string instead of going like that, because it's so much fun to slide into it. Just so much more fun. So we start in position 2, but we immediately go into position 3, which is such a great part of this scale here, especially for use with like the Mixolydian flat 7 kind of thing. Oh, I'm sorry, I put a 4 in there. And I'm sorry, I'm doing a grace note. I was playing a note that wasn't in the tab. And I'm not sure if this came through in the original video, but what you're doing here is you're walking down the scale in sixths. And that means you take a note and you're harmonizing with that note. This is the melody line. Like that. But then you're going down the scale in a sixth lower in the scale. And the 6 is probably my favorite interval. I love harmonizing in sixth. I mean, I said you take a note and then you go down a sixth to harmonize. That's honestly the way I usually think about it with sixths. But you can also think of it as you take a note, which being the lower note, and you go up a sixth. It's, a similar kind of mentality. So let's move on to figure 3.1, and that's just the same riff in the key of C, but it's going to be just slightly different. So we're going to start here on the 10th fret. That's a C. We started here on the 5th fret. That was a G. So it makes sense. 10th fret here is a C. Okay, so I continued the riff and I broke our rule. I totally broke our rule about the scale and everything, because I actually did use the 4 of the Mixolydian mode, and that's not a note that I said we'd add, but I used that F natural there because I wanted to continue the sixths down the scale, because in order to use sixths and really play the whole scale, I'll play kind of the whole thing in sixths. Like that, you're going to want to use the actual Mixolydian mode, not the weird major pentatonic scale with the added flat 7 that we're using. Maybe we'll do a lesson at some point on harmonizing in 6, because they're very, very cool. So, but this, if you want to learn that riff, I think it's kind of cool. And that 4 is right there. 6th fret of the B string, and then you just land there on that outlines the 1 chord. I'll do that again. And if you keep looking at the tab and you're like, why does that not quite sound the way he's playing it? It's because I keep throwing this weird articulation in there. I'm going like that. I'm like playing that note before I slide up there. I need to not do that. But it's just a matter of taking the riff, making it your own, however you want to do it. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next set, which is riff 4. And this whole set, 4.1 through 4.3, these are all arpeggio-based riffs, okay? The Mixolydian mode, or the major pentatonic scale, major blues scale with an added flat 7, they surround a dominant 7 arpeggio, or you could say a dominant 7 arpeggio just fits in there. And a dominant 7th chord is 1, I'll do it in C, 1, 3, 5, and then flat 7. You add another 3rd on top of the 5th. 1, 3, 5, flat 7. So in C, that's C, E, G, B flat. And that's me playing a dominant C7 arpeggio in multiple octaves. And one thing, at the beginning of this pandemic, I really tried to get a lot of my dominant 7 arpeggios under my fingers. It was some practice I was doing every day. And I've lost a lot of it, unfortunately. But this is one I like quite a bit. And if you practice it, you can really get it down fast. Even with, I've got it written with sweep picking even, but secret, I can't sweep. I've never been good at sweeping. You know, all the metal guys, they're all gonna make fun of me and everything. So it's figure 4.1, it's a G7 arpeggio there. Oh, sorry. I told you I couldn't sweep. And if you're not familiar with sweep picking, that just means that everything, like on the way down, you're using upstrokes. Like you're sweeping or raking across the strings. There's some guys that can do it really, really, really well. I'm not one of them. But go ahead and take a look at the picking pattern there. It's a set of 3 upstrokes. Down, up, down, up, like that. And that one, that I think of the full, you know, multiple octave, dominant 7 arpeggios, I feel like that's the one that lends itself best to that kind of triplet pattern, is right there in position 3. That works really, really, really well under my fingers. I have an extension of that written out here. Let's see if I can remember it. Yeah, okay, so I have it going. And the reason I did that, you could take the ending of that and grab it and use it in your own playing. You could take the beginning of that and use it in your own playing. You could take the whole thing. But the reason I did that was to show you part of the scale surrounding it. Okay, that's the big thing to recognize there, is at the end of the day, you've got to see where it lies in that scale, in that major pentatonic / blues scale, and just see that, and that way you're going to be able to use it in multiple keys. If I take that and I want to do it surrounding a D7 arpeggio, I was doing it in a G7 arpeggio. All right, I think I've got my ear around it now. I'll do it in D. We're gonna do it down here. I'll do it in the key of F. Okay, and what I'm doing, I'm just playing position 3 of that major pentatonic blues scale kind of thing. I'm just playing it in the different keys. I played it in D here because that's the root note. That's the root note in the key of D. I play it here because that's the root note in the key of F. If I do it in the key of B, okay? And it's all stuff that takes practice. It really, really is. But you'll get it eventually. I mean, if it seems difficult, don't worry. I mean, like, after you've been doing this for a while, you do eventually get it. But it all takes time. All takes practice. Hopefully the practice is fun for you. That's why we play music, right? So we'll go ahead and take a look at the last one that is an arpeggio-based riff. And this is just one I use a lot. I use this pattern a lot, and it goes. Sorry, I threw another note in there. And sorry, I threw another note in there. It just goes like this in the riff. And that's my attempt at sweep picking again. And if you notice, this looks a lot like this bar chord, right? You know that bar chord? Well, do you know this bar chord, the G7? Really, what we call an A7 there. So this is an A, major chord, open chord. We take that, we pretend that that nut is us barring, and then we make it into a B major chord. Then we make it into a B, or I'm sorry, this is a B flat, now a B, a C, and so on and so forth. We do that with A7, and so that's our A7 shape right there. And you just outline that, and it fits really, really well over a G7 chord right there. Or if you do it over D, I'm just transposing it. That's all I'm doing. If I do it over F sharp, oh, that sounds very difficult, right? But no. It's just there. That's the beauty of the guitar. The beauty of the guitar is that everything kind of looks the same. Like once you learn a riff, once you learn a major scale, well, you just move that major scale. That was a D major scale. I'm going to play the same exact shape, but I'm going to play it in G sharp. I didn't have to think about like the notes or anything like that, or the individual note names or anything. I knew the shape, and so that's what you're doing with the riffs when you transpose them. Play it in the key of C. Play it in the key of C, down an octave. E flat. I hope that makes sense. Take a look at 5.1. I just wanted to add this riff because I know that I liked it. And sorry, it's a little crammed on the page here, so I just want to make sure that I have it down. I have it in the key of D major, and it's in position 5. So right there, and we go. Oh, I like that, yeah. I knew there was a reason I included this one. All right, so remember at the very beginning of the lesson, before things cut out, I told you that this note here, this flat 7 in position 5 is probably the one I use the most. I really do. I love this kind of thing. We go root note there. And this is kind of cool because that 10th fret of the 3rd string, we hit a blue note, and then that resolves to the major 3rd. And I'm trying to do my version of sweeping on this as well. So notice that blue note, that 10th fret, that's a half step away. That's the note that's right under that major 3rd on the 7th fret of the B. So that kind of resolution, half step resolutions, are very, very powerful in music. And then that's your flat 7, that 10th fret. Pull off, blue note, and on the major 3rd. All right, folks, thank you for hanging in there with us this week. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and I'll see you next week. Off the top of my head, I believe we're going to work on, it may say the Dorian mode, but it's, I think, going to be a similar situation where we're going to take the minor pentatonic scale, add another note. What is that other note? It is a natural or a major 6th to the minor pentatonic scale. That's what we'll talk about adding next week. It's a note that I really like a lot. So anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you next week with more Riffs with Mark. Y'all take care.